3 and the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus are two very different phones. One is Samsung's high-end flagship and the other is more of a budget device. Yet surprisingly, both are giving a very similar experience. So should you really spend more money on a flagship device? Let's find out in this quick comparison. When it comes to the build quality, both of these devices feel really similar. Both have backs made of glass and they both feel really premium. The difference comes in sides and the front. Let's start with the front. I think the Nova 3 looks a bit better since the bezels reach the top. And even though there is a notch, the front panel just looks more modern. The S9 Plus makes up for this by having smaller side bezels and curved sides, which do feel more premium. Speaking of the sides, both of these phones have a metal frame, but the Nova 3 has more of a glossy finish, while the S9 is matte. I prefer matte finish because to me that feels nicer. One positive thing in the Nova 3 is that the phone is much thinner and lighter than the S9, despite having a slightly larger battery capacity. And the fingerprint sensor feels so much more comfortable. Another thing that's available in the S9 is water and dust resistance, while there is no ingress protection on the Nova 3. At the end of the day, it's impressive that the Nova 3 is giving a build quality that feels as good as the S9 Plus in a much less price. But I will still go with the S9. I like having more heft and I prefer matte sides over glossy ones. Also, the curved glass on the S9 feels so good. So when it comes to the build quality, I'd go with the S9 Plus. When I was reviewing the Nova 3, you can see that video link in the description. Anyways, I mentioned that the Nova 3 has a really decent display, but I wish it was an AMOLED panel. Well, the S9 Plus does have an AMOLED panel. And since Samsung is arguably the best AMOLED producer in the world, there's no surprise that this phone has one of the best displays available in the market. It's a 2K panel compared to a 1080p panel on the Nova 3. So not only is it more crisp, but because it's AMOLED, the colors are just so much better. Everything just pops, and the contrast is much better, since the blacks are completely turned off. Lastly, it's just so much more enjoyable. When it comes to Samsung and displays, there's really no comparison. Samsung creates the best of the best displays, and it's even more evident when you compare it to a really good LCD. Again, the Nova 3 has a really decent display, and it's great for everything. But the AMOLED display on the S9 is just so much more better. So when it comes to displays, Samsung remains undisputed. I'll go with the S9 Plus for the display. Both the S9 Plus and the Nova 3 are carrying high-end processors. The Exynos 9810 and the Kirin 970 are both really good processors. If we are talking about raw performance, then the S9 Plus scores higher in benchmarks and has a better GPU. But if we are talking about real-time performance, then there really isn't much of a difference. So if you are looking for a phone that feels smooth and performs well, then you will be happy with either of these phones. The big difference in performance comes in software. When it comes to Huawei's EMUI versus Samsung experience, I'd go with the EMUI. Sure, Samsung experience is quite a lot better than old TouchWiz. But here's the thing. When I'm using Nova 3 or any Huawei phone, I feel like I'm getting the best of what Huawei has to offer and what Google has to offer. Like when I'm calling or using the camera, I'm using Huawei apps. But when I'm using an assistant app or when I'm texting, then by default I'm using Google's app. This shows that Huawei is willing to use Google apps when those apps are giving a better experience. However, when it comes to Samsung, I feel like Samsung is trying to push me to use their own apps which do the same thing as Google's but in a much worse way. I mean, should I say more about Bixby? The last thing I want to talk about in the performance section is the features. There's really no comparison. The fingerprint sensor and the face unlock is miles better on the Nova 3. while the fingerprint sensor is extremely uncomfortable in the S9 Plus. The face unlock is also really slow, and even though there is an iris sensor which is even slower, the best way to unlock the S9 is really using the pin or a pattern on the lock screen. This is no problem in the Nova 3. The face unlock is really good. It unlocks the phone even before you reach for the fingerprint sensor. So at the end, even though there's more raw power in the S9 Plus, the Nova 3 is actually using its capabilities in a much better way. And it's giving better features that overall make the device more usable. This is why when it comes to performance, I'd go with the Nova 3. The S9 Plus and the Nova 3 both have a dual camera setup, but they both have a very different function. The S9 Plus has a 12 megapixel primary lens and another 12 megapixel telephoto lens. Telephoto lens gives 2x optic zoom to the camera. The Nova 3 on the other hand has a 16 megapixel primary lens and a 24 megapixel monochrome lens. The monochrome lens captures more details. When we were talking about the performance, I mentioned that the Nova 3, even though it has less raw performance, it does a better job of using its capabilities. This is also true about the camera. Even though in raw performance, the S9 Plus has a better sensor, there's really no comparison with Huawei when it comes to the AI features and the portrait mode. These features, especially the portrait mode, is much better on the Nova 3. The edge detection is miles better, while I feel like Samsung really hasn't innovated in this part of the camera. So in short, again the raw performance is better and the sensor is better on the S9 Plus. But if you are interested in the AI features or the portrait mode, then you should go with the Nova 3. Personally, I would go with the Nova 3. Let's talk about battery life. The S9 Plus has a 3500 mAh battery, while the Nova 3 has a 3750 mAh battery. Even though there is not really that much of a difference in the battery capacity, the Nova 3 has a better battery life. Since the display is less power hungry, I can easily take the Nova 3 to a day and a half, while the S9 Plus usually dies after a day's usage. In the end, the Nova 3 and the S9 Plus are both fantastic phones. S9 Plus is a great high-end phone for someone who doesn't want any compromises in the phone. And the Nova 3 is more of a budget device that aims to give you all the high-end features at a much less price. In the S9 Plus you get a more premium feeling device with water and dust resistance, a much better display, while in the Nova 3 you get a better implementation of features like the face unlock and the fingerprint sensor, a better camera implementation, and finally better battery. It is amazing that the Nova 3, a device that's much less expensive, can go toe to toe with the S9. Over and over again I kept asking myself, why should I spend more money on the S9 when essentially the Nova 3 is giving me even better features at a much less price. But still, even though the Nova 3 is a really good device, when it comes to buying, I go with the S9 Plus. I love the display and the build quality on the S9 Plus. So personally I'm willing to put up with everything else. But this all depends on you. If you just want a fantastic device and you're on a budget, then you should really go with the Nova 3. But if budget isn't really an issue for you, then I guess you should go with the S9 Plus or wait for the S10.